Christmas. Let's all get a bit Christmassy and talk about A Christmas Carol for a minute. I'll assume you're all familiar with it, so I won't retell the plot. But it's occurred to me that the format of A Christmas Carol can easily be applied to Eyes Wide Shut as well. Oh dear, something's happened. The format of Christmas Carol is divided into 5 chapters or 5 staves, as Dickens calls them. And stave 1 is your typical setup. We are introduced to Scrooge at his lowest, in a sort of status quo which Dickens forces us to believe has to be changed. He's being his usual mean self, denying people food and money. In a very similar manner, Kubrick at the beginning introduces us to the Harford's relationship at perhaps its lowest point so far. Being that the film begins in a sort of very private space, a bathroom, a changing room, we are sort of expecting something titillating to happen, perhaps sexual, but we are only seeing them in a very mundane, very frigid relationship, discussing about getting dressed, where the wallet is, even the comments about whether she's looks pretty or not seem very cold and distant. The second stave, which is separated by a traumatic event, which sort of offsets the status quo. In the case of Christmas Carol, that would be Marley's ghost. In the case of Eyes Wide Shut, that's the dead prostitute. In stave 2, we are introduced to the ghost of Christmas Past, which is described as its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it, and the tenderest bloom was on the skin. Its legs and feet, most delicately formed, were like those upper members bare. It wore a tunic of the purest white, and round its waist was bound a lustrous belt, the sheen of which was beautiful. But the strangest thing about it was that the crown of its head there sprung a bright, clear jet of light, by which all this was visible. In most adaptations of A Christmas Carol, she is portrayed as a female child, mainly because she signifies birth and a sort of a rebirth which is offered to Scrooge. She presents him with visions of the past, which Scrooge was not aware of, much in the same way Alice does in the smoking pot scene. The third stave, which is all about the ghost of Christmas Present, begins with a description of the ghost, which says its genial face, its sparkling eyes, its open hand, its cheery voice, its unconstrained demeanor, and its joyful air. He signifies life well lived, the life of those aware of the present, and introduces Scrooge to what is happening in the present, that which he's blind to. Much in the same way, Nick Nightingale introduces Bill to the party, which is happening all around him and he's simply not aware of it. To quote Frederick Raphael from Katrina's presentation yesterday, the essence of the party is to excite Bill for him to feel that this is the life. He's being introduced to what is happening around him. The fourth stave introduces the ghost of Christmas yet to come. Like a mist along the ground in the very air through which the spirit moved, it seemed to scatter gloom and mystery. It was shrouded in a deep black garment which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of it visible save one outstretched hand. But for this it would have been difficult to detach its figure from the night and separate it from the darkness by which it was surrounded. It has no corporeal form, only a hand, the limb which executes that which the hidden mind commands. It signifies death, much in the same way the non-corporeal threat to Harford's life from an unseen and unknown force grander than him does. He gives ominous visions of the future, which signify death, the death of the prostitute the dead prostitute in the autopsy room. So why does this comparison seem so easy? Is it because Kubrick wanted us to make it? Well, maybe not. I think it's more likely that it looks easy because A Christmas Carol is a quintessential example of the journey of self-discovery. And which brings me to the absurd, or absurdism. There's a very nice definition from Camus, which says that the absurd refers to the conflict between the human tendency to seek inherent value and meaning in life and the human inability to find any in a purposeless, meaningless, and chaotic and irrational universe. which seems to me to describe Bill's bad 2 nights quite well. It doesn't seem to very far to believe that Bill might have thought the same as Antoine does in Sartre's Nausea, when he says, "My existence was beginning to cause me some concern. Was I a mere figment of the imagination?" Now, we have to talk about the 2 big founders, to say, of Absurdism, which are Sartre and Camus. Now, what's the difference between a Sartre character and a Camus character? Which one is Bill? Well, a Sartre character rages against the absurd until the point of self-destruction. For instance, Hugo in Sartre's Dirty Hands finds himself in a very pleasant environment with Oderer, but begins to question himself and doubt Oderer's intentions until the point where he murders Oderer and then commits suicide. Meanwhile, Camus' characters embrace it with an uneasy feeling of dread. There's a wonderful line in the play which says, "The furious revolt of the first weeks had given place to a vast despondency, not to be taken for resignation, though it was no the less a sort of passive and provisional acquiescence." So it is very much my belief that Bill is a very typical Camusian character, someone who encounters the unknown, understands the absurd, tries to rage against it, tries to do something about it, and then eventually finds himself having to give up and just embrace the absurdism as it stands. This sort of giving up is also very well giving up with a dread for the future. He understands that he can do nothing about it. He feels that something bad is going to happen, but he just gives up. Much in the same way Ryu does in the Plague, in the ending, which says, "And as he listened to the cries of joy rising from the town, Ryu remembered that such joy is always imperiled. He knew what those jubilant crowds did not know, that the plague bacillus never dies or disappears for good, that it can lie dormant for years and years, and that perhaps the day would come when, for the bane and the enlightenment of men, it would rouse up its rats again and send them forth to die in a happy city." Which brings us again to the 5th stave of A Christmas Carol, where Scrooge changes his life and becomes a good man, but half a dozen. He just returns to the old one, embracing the absurd and basically giving up on the fight. So now let's look at absurdism as a genre in drama. And how Eyes Wide Shut fits into it. I think Eyes Wide Shut, it can be argued that Eyes Wide Shut is almost a seminal cinematic work of absurdism. First, let's look at its dialogue. Obviously, the 2 names that immediately spring to mind in the Anglophonic word when it comes to absurdism are Beckett and Pinter. I think Eyes Wide Shut is very Pinteresque. First of all, the dialogue is very Pinteresque with its repetitions, which Jeremy talked about yesterday. He offered the dialogue between Domino and Bill, where Domino says, "Come inside with me," and Bill repeats, "Come inside with you." I'll also offer Gale and Bill, where Gale says, "Don't you want to go where the rainbow ends?" Bill says, "Do I want to go where the rainbow ends?" And also Sally and Bill, which is almost utterly Pinteresque, where he asks when Domino will be back. Sally says, "I have no idea." Bill, "You have no idea?" Sally, "She may not even be coming back." Bill, "She may not even be coming back." Sally, Bill, "You, Sally, I don't know." Bill, "You don't know." Here's a little excerpt from Pinter's Victoria Station. Forgive my interpretation. Controller, "Listen to 2474. I've got every reason to believe that you're driving a Ford Cortina. I would very much like you to go to Victoria Station in it. That means I don't want you to walk down there. I want you to drive down there, right? Driver, everything you say is correct. I am in a Ford Cortina." Controller, "Good, that's right. And you're sitting in it while we're having this conversation, aren't you?" Driver, "That's right." Controller, "Where?" Driver, "By the side of a park." Controller, "By the side of a park?" Driver, "Yes." Controller, "Yes? What park?" Driver, "A dark park." Controller, "Why is it dark?" Driver, "That's not an easy question." Controller, "That's not an easy question." Driver, "No." So this sort of dialogue which repeats and falls into itself is very Pinteresque. But then there's also the constant use of sexual subtext in the dialogue, which is almost never openly stated in Eyes Wide Shut, much as it's never openly stated in Pinter. Here's a bit from Pinter's Old Times. Dealey, "How's the yacht?" Anna, "Oh, very well." Dealey, "Captain, steer a straight course." Anna, "As straight as we wish." Then there's also the constant use of memories, which upset the plot of the characters. Again, we'll refer to old times, which is very well described by John Weaver as a delicate balance between a comedy of manners and a playing out of struggles for domination in both the present and the past. It is a story of a sort of a love triangle between a character called Dealey and Kate and Anna. Kate's his wife, Anna's the upset from the past, who comes in and causes jealousy in Dealey, and both of them, both Dealey and Anna and Kate, who are both, for different reasons, jealous of Anna, desire to control her. In the film, even Pinter's contemplative pauses seem to have been recreated within the pacing, with long stretches of silences and walking between meaningful dialogue scenes. And then something Matt mentioned yesterday, which is games playing, which is also very, very common with Pinter, most common in The Lover. There's a lovely bit from Wikipedia, which I ran into. It doesn't cite the source, but it says very well that The Lover contrasts bourgeois domesticity with sexual yearning. It could apply to Eyes Wide Shut and The Lover. Additionally, The Lover begins very much the same way as Eyes Wide Shut does, with the two of them getting ready to go out, with an unspoken subtext of jealousy underneath, and it ends in the exactly same way, with the husband finally accepting the game which he's been reticent to accept thus far. Then let us look at the staging, the acting, which is intentionally emotionless, stilted, almost artificial. Both Pinter and Kubrick used almost the same methods to achieve this, sort of tiring out actors by constant repetitions, and also giving them very vague descriptions of what exactly they wanted, until the actors sort of stumbled upon it themselves. There's a famous bit, I think Barry Foster says, Anthony Hopkins actually, when he asked Pinter, what exactly do you want me to do? And Pinter said, I don't know, just do it. There's also there's also a very distanced, almost cold atmosphere to the film, which is also very inherent in adaptations of Pinter's work, or stagings of Pinter's work, as well as introducing certain surreal elements, which are never really explained, but are there and cause an upset in the atmosphere, which I'd like to look at as well. There's an atmosphere of threatening undertones to seemingly mundane conversations, which Pinter is very famous for, and I think Kubrick emulated very well in Eyes Wide Shut, a sort of a comedy of menace, if you will, which is what Pinter would call it. Funny moments, which are then upset by very tragic and extremely threatening moments, which promise violence, but which we never really see, and which never quite happens. There's a lovely quote Pinter once said, when he doesn't like the quote, but it's very good. When he was asked by a journalist, what are your plays about? And he was tired, and he just answered, oh, it's about the weasel under the cocktail cabinet. Well, if we interpret that line, it would say that there's something hidden and menacing under the exterior of this bourgeois decency and the tuxedos. And finally, let us look at the plot, which is circular. It falls into itself, but it's also full of wrong turns and blind alleys, certain subplots which are never resolved. And finally, Bill is a character forced into passivity by an oppressive world, something which is a very recurring theme in all of Absurdism. It's, I noted it's Kafka by way of Václav Havel. If you read Václav Havel's plays, for instance, The Memo, you'll also find a very labyrinthine plot in which our main character tries to decipher, but is constantly being pushed back by the oppressive society, which is not actively trying to stop him in his pursuits, but he just can't penetrate this world of absurdity. Perhaps due to a Wittgensteinian lack of context, we are given to these scenes we are seeing. We are almost seeing them out of context, and we just cannot understand them, much the same way an absurdist character cannot understand a meaningless world. Thank you.